Good morning, friends, and welcome back to another episode of PB Reads the Bible. In fact, it's episode 10 on our journey through Matthew. And I'm PB, I'm Pastor Brian, pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church in Waynesboro. And it is a pleasure to have you joining us today. I am humbled when I hear from folks that this is valuable, when I see that folks are joining like every day, and some of you have been following along since we began this 1 year ago today. As a matter of fact, 1 year ago today we started this. Well, so that would make this day 366, but there were days that we took off. When we started, I was reading even on Saturdays and Sundays, and then I pulled back a little bit from that, especially the Sunday part. It was a little tricky. And so I give myself a break once in a while. And but so we still have to be close to 300 days that we've been doing this. I'd have to go back and count that up. And I don't want to do that. That sounds like too much work. But it is day 10 on our journey through Matthew. We'll be looking at Matthew chapter 10 today. We actually are going to start a couple of verses of before the beginning of 10, the last 3 verses of chapter 9, because the person who separated the chapters got that one wrong. And we're going to correct his or her mistake. Anyway, go ahead and check in. Let me know that you're watching, or that you, even if you're not watching live, that you're watching some other time, just so I know. I do check in to see, because I want to know if you're making any comments or if you've got any questions, especially if you have questions about anything. Please put that in the comments section of the stream, or send me a text on any of that stuff too. 570-351-1619. So you've got several folks already checking in, saying good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Cheryl. Yes, it is. It's a crisp December day. Could be worse. It could be worse. I just keep telling myself that it could be worse. It's not as bad as it could be, but there was frost on the van outside when I went to take the kids to school this morning. Good morning, Marilyn, and good morning, John. Good to be with you again today. I was with John and Cindy a couple hours ago, the midweek prayer session with our DS, with Kathy. Although we had to settle for a substitute, me, to lead that time. But it's always good to get together with folks. So anyway, today is Wednesday, Wednesday, December 1st. So, that does mean it's December. That does mean it's cold. That does mean it's going to continue to get a little darker, a little darker, a little darker. But it does mean that it's only 20 days until things start to turn around and get a little brighter, a little bit more sunshine, a little bit more daylight, coming up in 20 days. But of course, that also means that it's 20 days until winter starts. Feels like winter already, but not quite. Good morning, Maureen. Good to have you joining us. Excuse me. Pretty sure Ron will not be live today. I think he has his therapy going on today, physical therapy going on today. So, so Ron's probably watching later. And Ron, good to have you joining us late. Good. Hope that therapy went well for you today. Oh, where else was I going to go? Again, as I mentioned yesterday, we pray for John and Cindy, and for Cindy's parents, Alan and Barbara, as they go through so much right now. Somebody's calling, but they're going to have to wait. As they go through so much, and so much transition and stuff like that. So keep all of that in your prayers. And I was reminded this morning that I think I mentioned it. Bill and Pat Short are away. So Pat was playing catch up the other day. Their travel plans have been postponed to come home because Bill is pretty sick with a sinus infection. She did say yesterday that he was feeling somewhat better and thinks he could drive home today, but she said we're going to play that by ear. So maybe they'll be heading back to our area today. Maybe it'll be another day or two. Keep them in your prayers for healing and for traveling mercies, should that be the case. whenever they end up traveling. I think that's all I have for that. Today is Wednesday, so tomorrow we'll be doing chapter 11 tomorrow. Time might have to be adjusted tomorrow. I'm going to try to be on at 9 o'clock, but it might be late. Might be like 45 minutes late. Might even be an hour late before I actually get on. So if you're looking at 9:03 and I'm not there, don't panic. Please be patient, and make sure you signed up for notifications with us. And I can't remember specifically how to do that. I have to kind of do it to guide somebody through it. But if you sign up for notifications on our videos, then whenever I do go live, you'll know. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get on to our reading, and we are starting with chapter 9, verse 36. Going to do those last 3 verses of 9 and carry it into 10, and you'll see why. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Pause. There's actually quite a bit there, so we're going to pause, even though I say it's connected to the next, because it is. The idea of sheep and shepherd is an ancient one for in Scripture. It's very scriptural, and the idea of Israel as the sheep is embedded in Scripture, embedded in the prophets and the psalmists. It's there. The imagery, the analogy of Israel as sheep, and in need of a shepherd, which was the job of the Pharisees. Really, all the religious leaders were to be the shepherds of the sheep, guiding them and keeping them safe and all that. However, Jesus sees that they don't have good shepherds. They don't have shepherds guiding them. They're being misguided, so to speak. But Matthew is using this, and he changes a little bit from Mark, but because he needs to make his points, his theological points. I sound like a broken record, but Matthew is very much connecting Moses and Jesus together. He's putting Jesus as the Moses typology, the Moses type. Not that they're equal, definitely not. And I think he's made that clear, but he's going to make it extra clear in not too long from now. He'll make it extra clear that Jesus is far superior to Moses, but he is still the Moses type. And so he's using this here for a couple reasons. One, we remember that what was Moses doing when he escaped, when he fled from Egypt following killing killing an Egyptian? He took up shepherding. He became a shepherd, and that's when God called to him from the burning bush, and he became a shepherd for Israel. But the idea of seeing a sheep without a shepherd also reminds us of Moses as he was nearing his end, and that he was not going to be able to complete his mission, making sure that there was a shepherd who would follow in his place to continue to lead Israel, and that was Joshua. So we see Matthew using these terms and saying about needing a shepherd and not enough laborers and stuff like that as following this Moses type and being concerned about having shepherds for the sheep of Israel after he's done. But Matthew also brings in a different, he has this analogy with the sheep and stuff, but then he changes his metaphor. Metaphor is a better word than analogy. He changes his metaphor and he talks about the harvest. Well, that word harvest, especially for first century Judaism and before, the eschaton. That's the parousia. That's the final judgment taking place. This is bringing in the idea of judgment, of the judgment, by changing his metaphor. We might say it's a mixed metaphor because it starts with the one talking about sheep and shepherds, and now it flips over to harvesting, to the grain and to harvesting. So it's not just leading, but also this going into the judgment aspect. So that's what Matthew is playing with here. Now, this does carry into chapter 10. Okay, so therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Continuing. Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew. James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Philip and Bartholomew. Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. It's weird that this splits it there. Anyway, so just read to the end. The one who betrayed him. Pause. So until now, there has only been, Matthew has only spoken about the call of 5 of these people. However, he also talked about others following, right? This is another point that shows up to indicate that Matthew is using Mark as his resource, and that he's writing much later, and that the people he's writing to, he's assuming, if nothing else, that they've already read Mark, that they're familiar with the stories from Mark, because Mark has the calling of more. He goes into more detail on some of that than Matthew does. Matthew has those couple calls stories to help to plant into the mind how the call works. But he doesn't go into all of them because he doesn't think it's necessary. However, now he comes to 12. Now he does use the word apostles, which I think this is the only time that word isn't that important to Matthew. Discipleship is kind of the important thing, but he doesn't really use apostles the way we typically do, and we try to separate disciples and apostles. For Matthew, it's basically the same thing. However, he calls them together, and now he gives them the number 12. It doesn't matter how many there were. No matter how many there were 12, because that number is symbolic. I'm not saying there were more than 12 or less than 12. We'll go with the 12. But the number 12 is what's important for Matthew. It has that symbolism attaching to the people of Israel, the nation, the clans, the tribes of Israel, and a restoration of Israel. And it's, so it's completion as well, the completeness of Israel, represented in these individuals, disciples, following Jesus. So that's why, some of the names differ from book to book, and we try to consolidate those things because we want to make things easy. We want to make things simple, and we want to make things rigid in some ways. And so, there's got to be 12. There's only 12. And if there's extra names, it's because someone was being called to different things. So Mark uses the word Levi, but Matthew and Luke use Matthew. So, it must be Matthew. They're the same person. They were called to different things. John uses the name Nathanael, but the other Gospels, the Synoptics, all use the name Bartholomew. It must be the same person, because we need it to be 12 people. As I said the other day, it would be highly unlikely. It would be extremely unusual for a Jewish man to be known by 2 Jewish names, 2 Hebrew names. The only reason for having 2 different names is a Jewish name and maybe a Greek name, like a nickname kind of thing, or a change in the person, in their role, and the name signifies that. Hence Saul to Paul, Simon to Peter, that kind of thing. All right. So don't get too caught up with the names, especially that there might be different from one gospel to another. The number is the important thing, not who they actually were, not the names. Now, the other thing that Matthew does is the use of the word "and." If you'll notice, through his 12, he uses the word "and" 6 times. He pairs everybody up. It's Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew. It's James and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew. Where was I? Thomas and Matthew, James and Thaddeus, Simon and Judas. Simon and Judas. So they're set up in pairs. Now, why does he do that? Well, first of all, Matthew seems to like twos. He likes twos. He so many times he uses twos. Remember, he doubles the number of demoniacs compared to the Mark story. He doubles the number of blind guys compared to Mark's story. He multiplies the number of times that Jesus performs that healing. When we get to Jesus's triumphal entry into Jerusalem, he turns it from one animal into two, which might be a misunderstanding of Malachi, but he seems to like two, and things are important. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it kind of matches up with the other story where Jesus sends them out by twos, which I think was 70 or 72 disciples, but sends them out in pairs, sends them out 2 by 2. So Matthew seems to be kind of setting it up as a 2 by 2. And so that's why he's got them matched up that way. So I'm going to reread the first half of 5 and carry it right into the next part. These 12, Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Pause. Why does Matthew say this? Because Matthew, again, is writing this 75, 80-ish AD, right? So 40 some years after this took, after the time in which he is recording it to be, he's purporting it to be, from the time of Jesus' physical life on earth. It's like 40 to 50 years later that Matthew is writing this. And he is writing it from Antioch. He is writing it from a church that is mixed, that is not just converted Jews, but is made up of Gentiles as well. And so why is he saying that Jesus tells his disciples only go to the people of Israel? Does he feel that way? Does he feel that it still needs to be that way? No, he doesn't. We know that because he's part of this mixed congregation. We also know that because when we get to chapter 28, when we get to the end of Matthew, he gives he puts those words from Jesus down as far as the Great Commission. Go where? Doesn't say go to the people of Israel, or doesn't say go only to the people of Israel. It says go to all the nations. Go to all the nations. So Matthew is convinced that the message is for Gentiles, and the missionaries of his first century church do have an important Gentile mission. But he doesn't want to put those words in Jesus's mouth until it gets to the time when Jesus actually says it. Jesus is still mostly keeping his mission to the people of Israel. Remember his interaction with the Roman soldier, the Roman officer, the centurion, can be read as a question: should I go to your house? And because of being Gentile. And we're going to have another story later where that woman calls out to Jesus and he says, I've been sent to who? The lost sheep of Israel. And should I just cast food to you instead? Paraphrasing. That's Brian's paraphrase of the story. So Matthew is keeping it, even though he's writing it post-Easter, even though he's writing it, much later, he's keeping to what Jesus' mission would have been like at that time. And Jesus wouldn't have wanted his disciples to go beyond what his mission was at the time. So continuing, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Oh, I'm sorry. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Time-wise, not location-wise, although perhaps both, we could say. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Pause. Excuse me. So what's Matthew saying? What's Jesus saying? Notice there's that word that came up in the earlier passage. Jesus was giving them authority. There's that special word that was so important throughout 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now Jesus is giving that same authority to his disciples, which again is code for church, for that first century church, and for us. So Matthew is saying Jesus gave this authority to us as well. However, notice not only what is there, but what Matthew does not include. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Nothing about teaching. Oh, proclaiming the good news that the kingdom of heaven has come near, yes, but that's about the only message you can give. But there's no teaching, there's no didactic mission yet. Again, yet, but that's because I would say Matthew puts that there because the disciples are still learning. Jesus, the master, is still there to teach them, so they're not ready yet to preach and to teach. Jesus will give them authority to do that with the Great Commission. You received without payment, give without payment. It would seem that Matthew, as opposed to Mark and Luke, he changes this and actually changes it specifically a little bit later on when he says, in fact, I might as well just read it. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff. For laborers deserve their food. Pause. So Matthew is saying, no, don't take anything because you will be provided for your food, but only food. Mark and Luke allow a little bit extra. They say a worker deserves their payment, deserves their pay. But Matthew apparently was had issues with paid clergy. He had issues with paid clergy there in the first century, and didn't want clergy to be paid except with food, keep them fed and housed, and that's about it. Mark and Luke also make a little bit of soften things up a little bit, might be a good way to say it, because I think they say it's okay to take sandals and a staff. But Matthew's stricter with all of this. Some people will translate this and say, "Oh, it's because you need to pack lightly, so to speak. You need to be you can't have a lot of stuff that's going to weigh you down." That really doesn't seem to be Matthew's point. Matthew's point has more to do with continuing the mission in the same way that Jesus did it, because we're told that Jesus, was this poor itinerant minister kind of thing, right? What does Jesus even say? I have no place to lay my head. And so Matthew seems to be saying that you need to keep doing the mission the same way that Jesus did. Continuing, whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy and stay there until you leave. As you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. Truly, I tell you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. Pause. That idea of shaking the dust off your feet was actually something that good Jews at the time we're told to do anytime they entered and left. And if they had to go into a Gentile town or a Samaritan town, when they left it, they were supposed to shake the dust off their feet. So they're not taking any of the Gentile, they're not bringing any of the Gentileness and Samaritanness back with them into the good land of Israel. And they're leaving it all back there. So that's part of that. Now, Jesus does seem, or Matthew seems to be giving Jesus the idea that the parousia, Christ's second coming, the eschaton, is right around the corner. Almost as if Jesus thinks it's going to happen. The final eschaton and final judgment is going to happen before the disciples even finish this mission that he's sending them out on. That might be putting a little too much into Matthew's words and into Jesus's words to say that, but that's we can see those hints in there because of the judgment aspect, especially there at the end, and those diabolical towns of Genesis being mentioned as being better than the towns around here in Israel. Continuing, verse 16. See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpent, as innocent as doves. Pause. And this part coming up too is where we can also see that idea of the eschaton being right here. And almost a mixing of pre-Easter and post-Easter. Pre-Easter and post-Easter taking place in this. But let's go back into this a little bit. Matthew takes this idea, this proverb of sheep among wolves, and changes it, because the proverb, that idea, that thought was that's what Israel is like, going out into the Gentiles. That Israel is the sheep, and everybody else are wolves. But Jesus is sending his disciples out where? Not to the Gentiles, but out into the people of Israel. And saying that I'm sending you out into Israel. I want you to go to the people of Israel, but he's calling them wolves. I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Beware of them, for they will hand you over to councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next, for truly I tell you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Pause. So there, very explicitly in that last verse, we get this idea that Jesus thinks the eschaton is it's going to happen before you even get back from this mission I'm sending you on, and all that part of before it is post-Easter. None of that stuff happened as Jesus sent those disciples out on that mission. He said, I'm sending you out now. He's not talking about the future. He's not talking about the future after I die and I raise. Then I'm sending you out. No, he's sending them out right now. He's sending them out right now. So they're not being flogged. They're not being brought before governors and kings. That doesn't happen until after the resurrection. So Matthew seems to be mixing this pre-Easter and post-Easter ideas into here for theological purposes, because of that end times, eschatology, eschaton, parousia, however you want to say it, mixing in. Now being flogged is, we're not just talking about being beaten up by mobs. This would be, the term he uses in Greek is very specific. It was a punishment for blasphemy. It was a punishment for blasphemy. And people are probably going to think you're blasphemous, and they're going to want to beat you up over it. They're going to want to flog you, not beat you up. They're going to want to flog you legally over your crime, and you're going to be brought before kings and governors. Didn't happen on this first mission trip. That's post Easter. That's post Easter. But Matthew is probably putting that in there because people are experiencing it at the time he's writing it. People are experiencing it, so he's given them a hint, that Jesus warned his disciples, and that does happen. Continuing, a disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher, and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. When I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Pause. So again, we see sort of this intermingling between the pre-Easter and post-Easter events and activities and things that happen to Jesus's followers, because this kind of stuff, we're not told anyway, didn't happen while Jesus was alive. It didn't happen on the first time that he sent out missionaries, that he sent his disciples out. Those activities, those events, those persecutions took place after the resurrection. They took place in Matthew, the author Matthew's time, not necessarily in the time of Matthew the disciple. But he's saying, if they treat me badly, they're probably going to treat you even worse, which makes sense. It does make sense to all that. Where else was I going? Oh, and yes, in verse 28, end of verse 28, there's that idea of hell again. At least that's how the NRSV translates it, in the NIV. Literally, the Greek is Gehenna. So it's that valley of Gahom. It's the town up. It's being cast out because you're of no use. You're of no use. Okay. Continuing. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Pause. Dire warnings. Again, probably not for the first disciples, but code for the church of the first century and the church today as well, for the Christians, the members of Matthew's community of faith, and what they were going through. And this part that Matthew inserts here, and when I say that Matthew writes this and inserts this, doesn't mean it doesn't come from Jesus. Most of it anyway are sayings that Jesus said, things that he said that were recorded elsewhere in parts of our tradition. But it's that Matthew takes them and puts them together and puts them in certain places. And he might have put them together here in this place because he's emphasizing the priority that discipleship must have in your life. Because for Matthew, it's really all about discipleship. So much of it is about discipleship. And there was that disciple, that follower earlier, someone who called Jesus Lord, wanted time to go bury his father. And Jesus said, no, let them bury themselves. You need to make this your first priority. That's what Jesus is saying again here. We say that Jesus used a lot of hyperbole, and he did, to shock and surprise and amaze people, and really open your minds to thinking, so that you can start thinking straight. And for Matthew, following Jesus is more important than your father or your mother. Following Jesus is more important than peace in your household with people who don't believe. Following Jesus is more important than any of that stuff. And you have to be willing to give up everything in order to follow Jesus. There is that phrase in there too, if you do not take up the cross and follow me. And we water that down. We think of a cross as minor burdens that we have. That's not what Matthew was saying. That's not what Matthew was saying at all. Matthew was literally talking about, life and death issues. Life and death. And if you don't pick it up, then you're not worthy of me. Read that way, it's even more powerful, isn't it? Okay, I think this is our last section, the last 3 verses. Woohoo! Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. End of chapter 10. So after the warning to the disciples and the warnings of discipleship, Jesus gives some words of blessing, we might say, rather than just words of warning. He gives the words of promise, the words of blessing. Anyone who welcomes you will be blessed, and because if I will be with you, I will be with them. If they welcome you, they welcome me. If they don't welcome you, then they don't. If anyone who welcomes a prophet receives a prophet's reward. Anyone who receives a righteous person will be blessed righteous. There's those words righteous, that word righteous coming out again, because Matthew, again, that's super important for him. That's part of discipleship too, part of discipleship. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water. So there's that adage, no good deed goes unpunished, but Jesus seems to be saying that no good deed is worthless. All good deeds, even something that you might consider minor, is a blessing and is a good deed and is a gift to someone and a sign of your righteousness and stuff like that. Forgot to check in, got so absorbed in the study. Oh, well, I'm glad God is using me to say something. Good morning, Marcia. Good morning, Marcia. Just in time for me to say goodbye. That's it for today, folks. That's it for chapter 10. We will be back tomorrow with chapter 11. Like I said, might be late. Make sure you're signed up for notifications on our live videos. That makes it nice and easy and simple for you to connect. And you don't forget. And if I'm late, you won't be on there extra early and all that kind of stuff. So again, friends, thank you for joining me, and I am humbled that you do that. I'm humbled when you say things that it's been a blessing to you, because it truly, in reality, it's a huge blessing to me that I'm doing this and I'm able to do it. So anyway, I do pray that it's been beneficial again for you today, that God has spoken to you and through something I've said, something we've read, that you've learned something or relearned something, maybe that you forgot, and something you needed to hear. And speaking of which, if you needed to hear something, go ahead and share that thought on Facebook, on your social media, because somebody else might have needed to hear it as well. Too much nasty stuff on social media. Let's get the good stuff out there, right? That's why I post my dumb jokes every day. Keep your eyes and ears open, physical and spiritual, for everything that our living, active, loving God is doing in your life and in the lives of those around you. When you see those things, when you hear those things, make sure you do two things, my friends. Make sure you say, "Thank you, Papa," and make sure you share it with somebody, because that could be a transforming difference in their life. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed.